Imagine standing in front of a massive crowd,
Hmm.
right? And you are literally swearing an oath to give up your own comfort, like your financial security, your physical health, all of it, just for the people looking back at you.
Right. Which sounds like, I don't know, joining the military or maybe taking a vow of poverty in some remote monastery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you aren't doing any of that. You are signing up for modern spiritual leadership. You're
Oh.
stepping into a job where, well, your success isn't measured by like a profit margin or a stock price,
Yeah, it's measured by the invisible, like internal spiritual health of the community in front of you.
which is just wild to think about. So we're going to connect the dots today on what it truly costs a human being to carry that kind of weight. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's an incredibly demanding proposition, honestly. It
Well,
completely upends how our modern society usually thinks about leadership, like ambition, self-preservation, all of that just goes out the window.
it really does. And today, we're looking at a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got a newly formalized document titled A Pastoral Creed, which is dated July 2026.
Yeah, and alongside that, we have this really compelling slide presentation of the Creed by Pastor Frank Brown, or, as he's affectionately called in the sources, Pastor Bear Brown.
Pastor Bear Brown, yeah. And these documents offer a very comprehensive, very intense set of structural rules for human organization and spiritual devotion.
Oh, totally. They really lay it all out.
Now, real quick, before we get into the actual mechanics of this, I just need to make our perspective perfectly clear to you, the listener, because the sources we're unpacking today, they contain very deep, passionate religious and spiritual convictions.
Right. Very strong beliefs.
Right. But our mission for this deep dive is just to impartially explore and understand this text. We're looking at it as a really unique, fascinating framework for leadership, devotion, and community building.
Exactly. We aren't here to endorse any specific religious viewpoints. We're just here to decode the expectations.
Decoding the intense expectations placed on modern spiritual leaders through the lens of this newly formalized creed. We want to discover what makes an effective shepherd according to this specific framework.
Yeah, we really want to understand the psychological and communal impact of these vows. Like, why is it structured this way? What happens to a community when its leader operates under these specific rules?
Especially for young leaders, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
For any young leaders or new pastors out there who might be stepping into this exact role, how does this creed function as a daily survival guide rather than just, an abstract piece of theology?
So let's jump right into how the creed starts, because it establishes the core identity of the leader before it even touches on the day-to-day job description.
Right, it sets the foundation first.
Yeah. The opening lines declare a dedication to the high calling. The speaker identifies as a shepherd of souls in the kingdom of the Most High and a member of a sacred lineage.
Which is heavy, and Pastor Bear Brown's presentation breaks this identity down into three pillars of walking worthy of the calling.
Which are bringing glory to the Father, honor to the body of Christ, and light to the world.
Yeah, and that establishes a massive baseline of responsibility. But what stands out immediately is this kind of harsh disclaimer attached to those three pillars.
The spiritual warfare part.
Exactly. The text says the leader must accomplish this regardless of the spiritual warfare in which I find myself.
And that specific phrase, that's where this really diverges from typical professional oaths. I mean, think about a doctor taking the Hippocratic Oath, or a judge getting sworn in.
Right. They vow to uphold the ethics of their profession.
Yeah, but a doctor isn't usually swearing to heal patients while simultaneously acknowledging that they'll be actively fighting off this invisible, relentless warfare.
Right. That's a completely different element. And just to demystify that term for a moment, in a practical leadership context here, spiritual warfare represents the intense psychological friction, the internal temptation, and just the profound moral exhaustion a leader faces.
Trying to uphold an uncompromising standard in a flawed world.
Exactly. The creed immediately acknowledges that this job is going to be a battleground, not a boardroom.
Not a boardroom, right. Which explains why the creed emphasizes starting with humility under what it calls the mantle of the pastorate. It purposefully decenters the leader.
Right. According to this framework, the role is absolutely not that of a CEO, a corporate executive, or like a charismatic entertainer.
The Illustrated Study Bible and the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible actually point that out explicitly.
Yeah, because that corporate model relies entirely on metrics, attendance, revenue, brand expansion.
How many seats are filled, right?
Exactly. By rejecting that model, the creed forces the leader to measure success by stewardship. The mantle of the pastorate frames the leader strictly as an under-shepherd.
An under-shepherd. So God is the chief shepherd, as Nelson's Bible Dictionary notes, and the pastor is just entrusted with his flock.
Right. His personal prized possession. They aren't building their own personal empire. They are caretaking someone else's most precious asset.
And because the creed systematically strips away the leader's ego and this desire for a corporate empire, it sets the stage for a radical redefinition of ambition.
It really does.
Which brings us to slide 3 of Pastor Bear Brown's presentation. The Sacred Guard and Covenants. The specific vow here is, and I quote, "I will not use my divine assignment or authority for worldly pleasure, gain, or personal security."
That phrase, personal security, is a huge stumbling block for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are listening to this on your commute, thinking about your 401k, your career trajectory, and how to build a comfortable safety net for your family, the idea of voluntarily surrendering your personal security probably sounds completely irrational.
It's totally countercultural.
Why would any organizational structure demand that?
Well, it demands it because it fundamentally changes the power dynamic of the community. Think about it. How does a leader actually survive without a financial or career safety net?
They have to rely on the people around them.
Exactly. By removing the corporate incentive to climb the ladder or amass a golden parachute, the creed forces the leader to rely entirely on the trust of their community and the depth of their spiritual calling.
It transforms them from an untouchable, secure executive into a highly interdependent community member.
Right. The security comes from the integrity of the relationships, not a bank account.
But, I mean, in a corporate setting, if you take on massive stress and responsibility without security, you expect a massive salary to offset it.
Yeah.
Here, there's no financial safety net.
Yeah.
So what is the psychological safety net that prevents this leader from just completely breaking down?
That's a great question. And the creed provides that exact counterbalance by dictating that faith is my watchword.
Faith is my watchword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just leave that as some abstract idea. It offers a specific methodology for managing that stress, commanding the leader to remain sharp in the word and sensitive to the Holy Spirit.
So the spiritual devotion isn't just an extra task tacked on to the end of the workday.
No, it is the core coping mechanism. The logic of the text is that human endurance will inevitably run out. You will burn out.
Yeah.
But when a leader leans into that spiritual sensitivity, they tap into an external source of grace that provides the grounding needed to maintain their personal integrity under just immense, uncompensated pressure.
Okay, that makes the internal mechanism clear. But because the creed systematically strips away the leader's ego, their desire for financial gain, and their reliance on worldly security, it creates this massive vacuum.
A huge vacuum, yeah.
And the creed dictates that this vacuum has to be filled with extreme interpersonal devotion to the congregation. This brings us to the section Pastor Bear Brown calls a shepherd's devotion.
This is where the creed moves from the pastor's internal integrity to the gritty daily practice with other human beings. The vow is really profound. It says, "I know my sheep by name, and I will always place their spiritual needs above my own flesh."
Above my own flesh. I mean, that means above my own tiredness, my own hunger, my own desire to just have a quiet weekend away from other people's problems.
The cognitive load of that is staggering because knowing hundreds of people by name isn't just about having a good memory, right?
Oh, not at all.
It means carrying their traumas, their secrets, their marriages falling apart, their deepest fears. And the demand to place all of those needs above one's own physical and mental need for rest, I mean, it requires immense, almost unnatural stamina.
It really does. And the
Yeah.
presentation pairs that heavy devotion with what it calls the ministry of truth. The vow is to speak truth consistently and never leave the saints without the counsel of God.
But it demands the leader be both just and compassionate, right?
Right. Using spiritual discernment to know exactly when to offer restoration or correction. And I immediately thought about the precision of a surgeon here.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, because this isn't just a coach giving a pep talk.
Yeah.
You have to know exactly when a wound just needs a bandage, some soothing salve, and time to heal. That's the restoration. In fact, the sources mention that when you free yourself of unforgiveness, healing takes place for all. That kind of emotional repair is part of restoration. But you also have to know when a wound has become infected. And despite how much it's going to hurt the patient in the moment, it requires a painful, precise incision to save them. That is the correction.
And imagine doing that surgery on someone you are deeply personally attached to.
Yeah.
That is the real psychological toll of the ministry of truth. What does it actually cost a leader to deliver a harsh reality check to a community member they care about deeply, knowing it might make that person angry enough to leave?
And they have to absorb that emotional risk constantly.
Yeah.
Discernment is the surgical tool used to calibrate when to comfort and when to cut, and if you get it wrong, you can fracture the community.
Exactly, which brings up a really critical structural problem.
Right, burnout.
Yes. If the pastor is absorbing the emotional risk of correction, carrying the trauma of the flock, and doing it all without personal security, the leader would inevitably break. The human body and mind can only take so much.
But the Creed actually builds in an organizational safety valve for this in the section on empowered ministry, doesn't it?
It does. The text mandates that the elders, missionaries, and deacons of the church must have the freedom to serve in their gifts, and it explicitly states they shall not have to bear the burdens assigned to me.
Assigned to me, meaning the pastor.
Right. This is a brilliant piece of organizational design embedded within a spiritual document.
It creates a protective microclimate. I picture it like the leader acts as an organizational umbrella.
I love that image.
Yeah, the pastor takes the brunt of the storm, absorbing the heavy hits, the systemic grief, the harsh elements of that spiritual warfare. They get completely soaked in the process.
Right.
And because they do that, underneath the umbrella, the deacons, elders, and missionaries can plant seeds, build programs, and thrive without being washed away by the weight of just mere survival.
That umbrella only holds up, though, if the structural integrity of the handle is solid.
And that integrity is built on absolute relational trust.
Exactly. The creed requires the pastor to vow, I will earn their trust and confidence through my walk with Christ. I will be faithful to those with whom I labor, mentors, peers, and disciples alike.
So for anyone studying leadership, this is a masterclass in how stewardship builds authority. You don't demand respect just because you have the title of pastor printed on your door.
No, you earn it by the transparency of your daily life and your faithfulness to the team around you.
Which is such a good point. And that earned trust is the foundation that allows for the next highly provocative vow in the text.
Oh, yeah, this part is intense.
The Creed instructs the pastor to move in the Spirit, taking bold action as led by the Word in the absence of earthly instruction. And I just have to pause here because in the absence of earthly instruction sounds incredibly dangerous.
It does sound like a red flag on the surface.
Right. In a modern context, doesn't this give a pastor a blank check to just go rogue, make unilateral decisions, and claim they have a divine permission to bypass the rules? Like, how does this framework prevent authoritarian, unaccountable leadership?
It's probably the most dangerous tension in the entire document. But the Creed builds in a very deliberate tether. The bold action is explicitly qualified. It says taking bold action as led by the Word.
Ah, okay.
So the action must be strictly grounded in established scripture. It cannot be a newly invented whim. And furthermore, look at the placement of this vow. It comes immediately after the commitment to remain faithful to mentors, peers, and disciples.
It's a built-in system of checks and balances.
Exactly.
So the bold spiritual courage is anchored by the community. You take the bold action, but you do it within the safety of the accountability structures you've already established with your mentors and your peers.
Right. You aren't a lone ranger operating in a vacuum. The framework demands an uncompromising holiness that relies on mutual submission.
Mutual submission.
Yeah, the pastor leads boldly, but the elders and peers hold the pastor accountable to the Word. Without that tension, the umbrella collapses into a dictatorship. But with that tension, it creates a highly dynamic, responsive leadership model capable of moving quickly during hard times.
And all of these intricate mechanisms, like the rejection of security, the surgical precision of the ministry of truth, the organizational umbrella, they all trace back to an ancient root.
They do. The grand finale of Pastor Bear Brown's presentation points us to the foundational blueprint for this July 2026 document. Slide 9 brings up Jeremiah 3.15.
Yeah, from the Amplified Bible, the slide quotes, "Then in the final time I will give you spiritual shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you with knowledge and true understanding."
I think the focus on the food the pastor provides here is very revealing.
Definitely. In a modern landscape where we're so used to being fed entertainment, quick fix, self-help, or just pure outrage, the required diet here is completely different. The food this leader is commanded to provide is knowledge and true understanding.
And the Creed frames this ancient verse as the operating system for the modern pastor. To be a shepherd after God's own heart requires every single mechanism we've unpacked today. According to the internal logic of this text, and the homiletical commentary points this out too, when a text speaks of a leader having a heart like the divine, it means their driving motivation cannot be status.
Or boosting attendance numbers.
Right, or keeping up appearances. Think of King David, right? He wasn't perfect, but he was called a man after God's own heart because his soul aligned with those desires.
The text relies on the idea that the divine heart is inherently rescuing and protective. Therefore, the leader's heart must be consumed by a fierce love for the health and safety of the people. What breaks God's heart breaks the leader's heart.
Exactly, and the sources take this even further, pulling in Hebrews 1.3.
Oh, right, the mirror analogy.
Yes, the idea is that when you look into the heart of God, the exact reflection you see looking back at you is Jesus Christ. He's the flawless mirror of the Father's heart.
Hebrews 1.3 says the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being.
Right. So, because Jesus is the perfect mirror, the modern believer never has to guess how God feels about them. You look at Jesus welcoming children, forgiving sinners, walking with the broken, and you see the true posture of God's heart.
But how does a young pastor actually manufacture that kind of fierce, pure love? Especially when dealing with the reality that human beings in any community can be exhausting, combative, and resistant to change.
That's the ultimate revelation, the big wow moment of this whole framework. The framework suggests that you don't manufacture it at all.
You don't manufacture it.
No, the entire system works on the premise that God guarantees the food if the shepherd stays close to the source. The logic is that when a pastor spends their time resting in the spiritual presence of their calling, remaining sharp in the word and sensitive to the Spirit, they naturally adopt the posture of that calling.
Ah, so you don't have to fake the energy or engineer the compassion.
Exactly. By staying tethered to the foundational identity of a servant, the pastor automatically begins to feed the flock with the exact kind of knowledge and understanding that actually changes lives, mends fractures, and causes real, sustainable growth.
It's a profound shift in perspective.
Hmm.
The leader isn't the source of the healing. They are merely the conduit.
Right, they are the bridge of grace. The Apologetic Study Bible mentions that God's covenantal love is based on relationship, not raw performance. He sees the hidden prayers, the exhaustion, and for young pastors starting out, this whole text acts as a huge motivator. It's basically saying, stay in the race, because you were chosen for this calling before the foundation of the world.
Which is a deeply comforting thought for someone under that much pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
When we step back and look at everything we've covered today, it paints a staggering picture of organizational and personal sacrifice. We started by looking at the heavy mantle of the pastorate.
The explicit acknowledgement of spiritual warfare and the psychological friction of leadership.
Right. And the absolute rejection of using authority for worldly gain or personal safety.
And then we examine the intense interpersonal devotion required to know the sheep by name.
The massive cognitive load of placing their needs above the leader's own physical limits.
And that surgical discernment required to balance restoration and correction.
We talked about the organizational umbrella, how the pastor absorbs the systemic burdens so the elders and deacons can serve freely.
We explored the necessity of earning trust through daily stewardship, which provides the accountability needed to take bold action in uncertain times.
And finally, we traced all of these modern mechanical vows back to the ancient blueprint of Jeremiah 3.15. The call to be a shepherd who feeds a flock with true understanding by simply staying close to the source.
This deep dive into the pastoral creed offers such a rigorous, unfiltered look into the demanding, sacrificial nature of this specific model of leadership.
It completely dismantles the corporate approach to running a community.
It really does. It's not a career path. It truly is presented as a sacred lineage, where success is measured by how much you're willing to pour out for others.
It really redefines what it means to be responsible for a group of people. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Okay, lay it on us.
The Creed explicitly states that the pastor will bear the heavy burdens so that the elders, deacons, and missionaries are free to serve in their gifts. We talked about that protective umbrella.
Right.
But if the shepherd is the one constantly absorbing all the weight, absorbing the grief, making the painful surgical corrections, and fighting off the spiritual warfare of the entire flock just to protect them, who shepherds the shepherd?
Wow, yeah. It's the vulnerability at the very center of this entire structure. Who holds the umbrella for the person holding the umbrella?
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the why behind the leadership structures in your own communities. Keep asking the hard questions about how authority and sacrifice balance each other out, and we'll catch you next time.